So when we started to go up the mountain again, it was a place called Bamo, and we started from there, and I think it took us a couple of days to up one side of the mountain, down another, up one side, another, like we did before, and we finally got to the top of this mountain, another mountain 5,500 feet or 6,000 feet high, and again the same thing. Nobody had been up there before. The natives came and helped us clear up the clearing, chop down some of the trees. Then we put out our parachute strip, and with the arrow, and with the same old walkie-talkie thing there, the handy grindy, we would make electricity, make the generator, and I would send it code, and send it again, and within a few hours, a plane would come overhead and start dropping us the supplies, the same thing. Radios, receivers, transmitters, generators, gasoline, food, tarps, food, everything that we needed to live up there. And while that was going on, the natives were building us what they called a basha made out of bamboo for the radio, one for the kitchen, and one to sleep in. And then the same thing we did, all like we did before. One guy'd be on the radio, one guy'd be outside with the powerful glasses spotting planes, and even if you couldn't spot any, you would hear whatever you heard, you would tell me, you'd put it down on a piece of paper, and I would send it out to the net control station. And the net control station would realize where that's coming from, because we had our codes, and if they had to disperse any fighter planes, they knew just where to call the fighter planes to go after them. They knew the area, the location. So that was our job, just to keep our pilots and the net control station informed of any unknown aircraft, enemy aircraft. So we were there, I would say, maybe 3 months, maybe 4. Well, in the meantime, the natives came and they had a little baby bear. Cute little son of a gun. They were showing it off. Couldn't have been over a month or 2 old. Very, very small. Nice little black bear. Well, with a few rupees and some cigarettes and tea, whatever it is, we bought the bear off of them. And we called him Maxie Bear. Just like the old pro fighter. There was Buddy Bear and Max Bear. We called him Maxie Bear. And I have photographs of him at home. And, he was a cuddly little thing. We used to feed him with a bottle with the milk. We got a piece of old inner tube, whatever it was, or something near rubber or hose, and we made it so he could drink out of that. And he was just the nicest cuddly thing. You'd hold him like a little baby. Well, within about a month and a half or so, 2 months, you'd be surprised how much he grew. And it was nothing for you to be sitting at the chair, and next thing you knew, he was coming up behind you, crawling up the chair, grabbing with those claws that were always out. And next thing you know, he'd be nibbling on your neck, on your hair, on your back, and clapping his hands around you. At first it was really playful and nice, but within a short while, that bite started to hurt. He got big so fast. And before we left there, like I say, 3-4 months, we had to give him back to the chief. He got too big, we couldn't handle him. And he would bite very strong, very hard. He would bruise your skin. So, okay. And another thing we had over there, because you never knew where the enemy was, that if a guy was working at night at the radio shack, nobody comes in that radio shack or enters that door unless he hollers out who he is. Like he'd say, Vince, it's me, GI, or Vince, it's me, Hitchcock, whoever it was. They would give their name and give you your name so you know that they know it's you, not just somebody making a name like, hello, Joe. So one night, I was alone working. The observation guy that was supposed to spot the planes, I told him, go to sleep. There's nothing out there, and nothing but fog and clouds, and you couldn't see a thing anyway. Go to bed. So there I was, very light dim. The only light we had was shining from one of the transmitters on the radio sets, and very quiet. And next thing I know, I hear a what the heck is that? The first thing you think about is Japanese, because we know that they were around there. Japanese. And next thing I know, The step is creaking and the door is opening of my radio shack. I was ready. I knew something was coming, so I swiveled over there and I grabbed my Tommy gun and I levered back to chamber to throw a bullet in the chamber, and bingo, was all ready to go, and I turned around ready to fire, and it was Johnson, one of our radio men. And about the time when I seen him, I quickly jerked the gun up in the air, thinking that I was ready to fire. And what happened was I pulled it back so fast, I jammed one of the bullets. Or if I'd have pulled it all the way back, chances are I would have killed him. And there I was with the gun up in the air, and I looked at him. His face was just as white as a ghost. And I was so mad, I reached over and I grabbed him and I shook him. He was a very small guy and I hated the hell, but I never thought about that. I figured how close it was that I almost killed him. And really it was the truth. I was so scared but so mad, and I shook him until he kept saying, I'm sorry. I said, don't ever do that again. What's the matter with you? He says he knew he was wrong. He apologized. Eventually everything all calmed down, see? But that was a lesson, that you were always afraid that the enemy could be there. So anyway, we went there about three and a half months. Next thing we know, we got a coded message. Tear up everything. Quickly get out of there. Get all your codes and take off. There's a guide coming. He's going to take you back to another camp or another place, wherever it was they were going to take us. We didn't know, but when you get that kind of message, you don't ask any questions whatsoever. We tore everything down. We had the natives dig a big hole right away quick, took the radio, the transmitter, everything that we had, except the codes. The sergeant grabbed all of our codes, and we had a little machine, I think it was called the MO9 or something like that. It was very small, smaller than a typewriter, about half the size of a typewriter, that you could send one message a million different ways. You could say, like, attacked at dawn, and the way you coded it, you could send it again and again and again and again, a million different times. And even then, they said that the Japanese, or whoever it was, might be able to break it within 48 hours. So as good as that thing was, after 48 hours, it was not classified anymore. It was not classified as secret message, that they had the ability to break it. There were some of those codes that they were only good for 12 hours. They figured after 12 hours they can probably break it. But we had a tremendous amount of them. But anyway, we got this at the highest code available. Get out. Tear everything down. Do not leave anything. Grab your food, supplies, your ammunition, guns, and go at the codes. So the natives dug this big hole. We put in everything that could fit in that hole, doused it with the gasoline that we had, and set a fire to it. And in the meantime, everything that we had that we thought that they would know that the Americans were there, we destroyed. And then packed everything up, got our bags and everything, the natives, and away we went. And we went down, I can't remember exactly how we went, but I know we traveled all that day. At night we stopped, and the next morning, maybe probably around noon, early afternoon, we were at a big road, paved road, not a paved road, but a dirt road cut out, and we just stayed there. So pretty soon, you would hear the rumbling, and you just about knew that it was one of an American truck, the sound that they made. So the minute that truck showed up, we stopped, and everybody knew that there were hill people up there, us. The natives already took off. The natives, I don't know what happened to them. They left our bags there, and the natives took off. And the truck would stop, and if he couldn't take care of you, they'd get on a transmission on their radio, and they would send some kind of a signal or whatever it was, and within no time at all, there'd be a truck there available. We'd all load onto it, and away we'd go back to a camp. And I think we went back to Bombo. I'm not exactly sure. But that was the second one there. Oh, and before we left, that was a place that just once it cleared up enough that we saw Mount Everest and the Himalayas. I don't think it lasted for 3-4 hours. And the top looked gold where the sun was sitting, and down below it was kind of a bluish, like ice. And from then on, it was nothing but clouds clouds all the time. Never saw it again. And there were so many times during the day that you never saw the valley below you. Nothing but white clouds, just like snow. And there you were up there, and if there were planes below, forget it. The only ones that you would see that were above the clouds, the 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 foot altitude. And it was pretty there. It was nice, but it was lucky that we got out of there and nobody got injured. So we went back to the main base and stayed there maybe 2-3 days. Got more or less rested up a little bit, got some new clothes, and reorganized our stuff. And next thing you know, you're back on the trucks again. And again, we didn't know we were going, but I know we were going towards the China border, near a place that I remember was called Kunming. We never went into Kunming, but that was a big, big base. But we were heading that direction. And I remember that we had crossed the Irrawaddy River. In fact, I have a picture of me by the Irrawaddy River. We crossed that, and then again, we stopped at another base of a mountain and picked up some of the native bearers, and again, they took our stuff. And I remember the last camp was not that high up. It was high up because we were already high as it was. And it was probably also the name of the 5,000 or 6,000 feet elevation. And again, the same thing. There was nothing up there. The natives had to cut everything down, build our huts. We laid out our panels, and the same thing. We sent out a signal, and then they brought us the stuff, and we continued on there. So, but it was basically the same as the other camps. The only things that I didn't mention is that you were supposed to dress according to what the instructions were. And on account of the mosquitoes and the leeches and the bugs, they wanted you at all times to wear long sleeve shirt, and at the bottom where your cuffs are, if possible, to put a strap or something around it so the leeches and animals or whatever it is cannot get into you. And the same thing is with your shirt. It had to be buttoned tight right at the top, and your pant legs, you should wear 2 pair of socks. One first, the pant legs over, then the other pair of socks over, and a strap around that. And if you had it, you'd put the mosquito repellent, soak your feet, your shoes, your socks, around your neck and your cuffs, because the leeches would get any place. You could be walking through the woods and think you're all protected, take off your shoes, and the leeches would be inside your foot. They could go right through the eyelets of your shoes. And there was no way that you're going to escape them, especially after a rain. You could walk 3-4 feet and you'd be full of leeches. And but anyway, nobody could dress like that. It was too hot, too humid. You were just sweating all the time. If you got down in the valley, you could get to 104, 105 degrees and you'd die of heat. Up there, most of the time, it was humidity that got you. So we used to wear just as little as possible. In fact, our cook, Dale Calderon, at one time had been a tailor. And when these chutes came down, we had 2 kinds. The plain white cheap chutes that they used on our food supplies, foodstuffs, and then the colorful ones, kind of a reddish and maybe yellow chutes that were made stronger, made out of nylon or rayon, and they would protect our good valuable stuff coming in. And those were prize chutes. And our cook said, hey, talk to the sergeant, if you don't mind, how about if I cut up one of those chutes? And kind of a rough like, he would cut out short sleeve shirt, open, nothing fancy, and make us all shirts. And it was really nice and cool. See? And so they had red and the yellow, and I don't think anybody wanted the white ones after that because they were too cheap looking. But it was nice and cool, and we had shorts, and we didn't care anymore about leeches. Nobody worried about the malaria. I did, though, but I figured, well, I had it once, maybe I won't get it again. But anyway, it was probably late afternoon. One of the chiefs came over, and I don't know how he conveyed to our sergeant that one of his men was very sick, and he wanted our medic to come and look him over. He didn't know what was wrong with him. So naturally our medic said, sure, he's going to go. And I happened to go with him. He says, come out with me. I went with him, and there was this native on the ground. They were kind of holding him down, his legs. He was thrashing over there, making all kinds of sound. It looked to me like froth was coming out of his mouth. He was in horrible looking shape. And this medic, his name was Gene Schultz out of Buffalo, he looked at me and he said, this guy got malaria. And he said, he is gone. He said, I can't do anything for him. And he said, the most thing I can do is give him a little shot to make him, to calm him down a little bit. That's all. There's nothing you can do. He's too far gone. So the guys were holding him down. He went back and he got his syringe and everything, and he gave the native a little shot. And I guess it did calm him down a little bit. So we went back to the camp. Bingo, the next morning, early in the morning, out comes the chief with another half a dozen natives, mad as a hornet. The guy died. The medic said, I knew he was going to die. What are you going to do? He was almost dead then. But the chief was very mad. He thought that somehow or other our medic killed him. And, well, I don't know what the sergeant gave to the chief. Sarah gave him probably some more of the dope, probably cigarettes and foodstuffs and maybe some rupees, some silver rupees. But in order to be safe, he gave the Gene Schultz his .45 automatic to keep with him in bed in case anybody came during the night for fearing that they would want to attack him or something. But thank God nothing happened. Everything turned out, and the natives, I guess, got over it. And so that was about it. And that station there, it was BD9. It's da-da-da-dit, da-da-dit, da-da-da-da-dit. And it was just one of those things that we finished our 3-4 months, whatever it was, duty. And except for the leeches and the bugs and the snakes, nothing really much happened. And so they give us the notice one time, get down off of the hills. Coolies are coming up. The native bears are coming up. And the following day, the native bears did show up over there. But again, they did not want any of the equipment whatsoever. And whatever we had, you could not transport it down. It was too big. The generators was too big. The gasoline, everything that we had, the same thing. We just dug a big hole and we buried it. When I got back down to that camp, there were so many other camps that were just on ground level that they had the equipment and they would not salvage it. They took it, and I have pictures of huge, big 15, 18 foot high mounds of receivers, transmitters, radio equipment, and a gasoline truck there pouring gas on them and lighting them and burning them. They would not give it to anybody. They just burned it right there. They said it was not feasible. It was cost effective to take it back to the States. And so that was it. Oh, and then when we got down to the base camp and happened to go into one of the villages there, it was my first encounter with a mongoose and a cobra. We always heard about the snake charmers, and it's true. They can have that thing like a big vase, and the little native over there making all kinds of noise on a flute-like instrument, kneeling down or squatting down, and he'll be playing beep, 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 whatever it is, very slow, and there's that snake coming out of that big, huge vase. A cobra, not a king cobra, the regular cobra, but still it was a awful-looking thing. And the snake would come out, and if you paid the guy enough money, otherwise they wouldn't do it because it's going to cost him a snake. If you paid him enough money, he would let the snake come out of that vase and get onto the ground, and then next there, within about 5, 6, 7 feet away, there was another basket. And he opened the basket, and it was my first look at a mongoose. The mongoose had come out. Well, the minute the snake saw the mongoose, he went right towards him, not attacking him, but he swiveled so he could look at the mongoose. And the mongoose, the same thing, turned, and they kept looking at each other and look at each other. Every so often one of them would make a little teeny move, maybe an inch, half an inch, and the snake would move his head sideways like that. And some of the snakes had the hoods on the side. They'd open up. And then we'd watch him, and you knew that something was going to happen. Next thing you knew, the snake would lunge And the cobra doesn't come out of a coil like a rattlesnake. It picks itself up about a third of its length up in the air, and it drops down fast. It doesn't really lunge like a rattlesnake. And bingo, down goes the snake, missed the cobra by an inch. Again, they would face each other, closer and closer. Again, the snake missed the cobra again. Second, third time, whatever it was, the snake would do the same thing. Next thing you know, the mongoose had him right by the back of the neck. And that was the end of that. That was the end of the snake. He'd just stand like that, grind his teeth, and whip him back and forth. And so naturally, everybody had to pay a couple extra rupees, to see that happen. But it was a fascinating thing how they could do that there. So that was one of the little things. And then they had a lot of little temples that we went to. Some were small, some were larger. Nothing really big. The villages were small on the average. They were poor people, and they were dressed kind of poor, and they were not what you'd call really educated. They were more or less like people that lived right off of the ground. And even when we had them up in the hills, they never had dishes. They never had utensils to eat. They would cook rice. That was their main food, was rice. And once in a while they'd throw in some kind of an animal in there, crush it up, whatever it was. And once they cooked that rice, they would put it on huge big leaves, like banana leaves. And then everybody would reach in with their hands and grab some and form it into a little ball and eat it, like that. No forks, no knives, or they would get another leaf and scoop some in there with their hands, and with their hands hold it up to their face and eat like that. I never saw them eating a steak or a pork chop or a roast or nothing like that we eat. No salad, no knife, no fork, nothing. No table, no chairs. They squatted on the ground and they lived just like that. I don't know to this day how they went to the bathroom or what happened afterwards. We never were that close to them. But we went back in time 100 years. The very first base that we went to in FG-38, when we got up to the top, besides our British interpreter, we were the second white men that they had ever seen. Once we got up there, and we had our generator and the electricity, and we strung a wire for a light bulb. They couldn't believe when we turned the switch and the light would come on. The very first time that we put the radio in, the guy that works the radio got a BBC station, British Broadcasting Station, had a powerful radio. Indian music coming out of there. He got the Indian music. The natives were at the door of the huts peeking in. And the minute they heard that music, they would run out. Then they'd get courage enough to come back in again closer. They got in closer, and they kept looking at that black box. And then they'd go out again. Then they'd come in, but pretty soon they'd have the nerve to come in and look around it, on top, underneath. Where are the people in there? What's going on? They could not believe that was a radio. Had never seen it before. The same thing with us. Light up a cigarette, put a cigarette in our mouth, get my Zippo lighter, whoosh, out comes the flame. Oh my God, they're scared to death. Flashlight too. When they were like little children, just so far back. They were starting fires with flints. They still had the rock and the flint making fires and saving fires. It was, to us, it was just like going into another world. And to them, I guess we looked like we're from gods from outer space or something. But they were like little children that they didn't know. And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed now that I think about it, that I had gone to those places and seen those things where never in my life would I have ever seen what I seen and done what I did. And that's about it right there. So we boarded the ship, this General Muir, and it was a lot different than coming over. It was an American ship, first of all. The food was unbelievable because we were victorious. A lot of food available, stuff that we haven't had for the long time, good fresh vegetables and everything. And we retraced our steps. We had to go from the Bay of Bengal down to the bottom part of India, all the way around the other side, through the Indian Ocean, had to go to the Red Sea, Suez Canal, Mediterranean, Gibraltar, the Atlantic, and finally in the early part of January, we entered the harbor of New York, and what a beautiful sight it was. Everybody cheering, so happy to see not only the big buildings, but the Statue of Liberty. That's the one that really brought on the cheers. And there were tugboats there in the harbor. They were blowing their whistles because they knew the troops were coming home. And it was really nice. It was a nice, joyful docking in the harbor. And I remember that we docked, and of all the things that they wouldn't let us get out that time. It was too late at night, too late in the afternoon, and we had to spend that whole night aboard the ship, and everybody was dying to get out, even though we knew we were going to go to another camp. But they were right, because it was getting kind of dark, and by the time they got through taking out hundreds of troops out of there with their baggage and all that stuff, that there was no way that they could do it safely. So, well, we spent that time over there. But all the way over, it was nothing like going to India. The mood was so relaxed. Drink, we had a lot of beer around there, card games, everybody played. They had money, I don't know where they got the money, pay or something, whatever it was. But it was a good mood. It was a nice, joyful mood, being thankful that you're coming back alive, and nothing really serious happened. And then we went to a place called Fort Dix, and there you were going to be discharged from there. Well, as the rule is, you had to have a physical. The Army had to make sure that you were okay, and they could discharge you and go home and get your clearance. So it started off, everybody, bingo, take off all your clothes and go in front of these couple of lieutenants. I think they were doctors. And first of all, the guy would take your blood pressure and your temperature, and that, I don't think it had amounted to too much. And there you stood in front of these two guys, and well, the first thing they'd say, all right, bend over, spread your cheeks. Oh, for heaven's sakes, all right, go ahead, bend over, and then check your front, the genitals and all that, under your armpits, make sure you're okay. All right, soldier. The guy would look in your mouth and in your ears. Okay, next. And I'd say, no, I want examination. I want x-rays. I want x-rays taken, and I think there's something wrong with my wrist and my chest. I had malaria. Malaria? Yes, I had malaria. And the guy said, you don't want to go. They sent me over to another guy to fill out the reports. The guy said, now you want to put in for malaria? And I said, yeah. You're from New York? You don't have to worry about malaria because you're going up into the cold climate. Get going. Get yourself discharged. Go home. If you stay here for that, they might keep you 2-3 weeks. All your buddies will be home. You'll be here getting examinations. I said, I don't care if I'm here another year. I want it down there that I have malaria. All right, okay. He filled it out and everything. Okay, eventually I finally got the train and everything, and I went back home, back to Salamanca. Naturally, a nice, joyful reunion was over there in Salamanca. And my mother and father owned a Riverview Hotel, and all of us who worked there, all the brothers, even my sister. So within a very short time, within a couple of days, I was behind the bar working again. And next thing I know, I hadn't been home 2 weeks maybe, and I could feel my back tightening up. And I said, oh boy. I knew what that feeling was. It was malaria because I had had it. And it kept getting tighter and tighter, and my back was getting stiff. And very luckily, there was a good customer that we had over there. Pete Schrader was his name. Nice old fella. And I said, Pete, get on the phone, call my sister, tell her to come and take over. I'm going to the doctor. Quickly, I got in the car, and I drove right to Dr. Unger's office. He was a German doctor, and I don't know how he knew. The minute I got in the waiting room, he knew me because he had been my doctor before. He knew me, he looked at me, and he says, you got malaria. How he knew, I don't know. He took blood out of my ear to send to the lab, and he gave me a prescription. I can't forget what kind of medication it was, or pills. And he said, go home and get right to bed and stay there. And another attack of malaria. We're shivering and cold and hot and cold and getting sick and throwing up and taking the pills. And 2, 3, 4 days like that until I finally got out of it. And so I put in the claim. The claim went through. I had to get the receipts from the pharmacy and from the doctor, and the lab report came back that I didn't have malaria. It was come back negative. And then the doctor wrote down, he said, this guy had malaria. The blood test came back negative. And what do you think of that? I couldn't believe it. Anyway, this went on I collected a small disability pension from them for 13 years. And for the first 10 years, I was getting attacks. At first, they started out like maybe say one a month or one every 2 months, fairly severe. And as the years went by, the attacks were less frequent and less severe. But I had them for 10 years. I really was taking pills. And for the first 6 years or so, they had me going to Buffalo for exams, fill out reports, do this and that to prove that I still had malaria. But after about 6 years, they realized that I really had malaria. I wasn't kidding, so they didn't have me go back to Buffalo. But they still paid me. I still got the stuff from the pharmacy, and I collected. After 13 years, there was no more pharmacy receipts, no doctor receipts. I didn't have anything to prove, so they cut out my disability pension. And since then, I don't think I've ever had another attack. Once in a while, I feel like my back is stiffening up, but it only lasts just a matter of an hour or two and it goes away. I never had it again, and I don't want it again. So that was it, and then I went back to civilian life, working at the hotel, and just getting back to what a good old civilian would do, and thankfully I came back with nothing really severe.